Welcome to the HoCo Cyber Collective Podcast, where community, technology, and stories converge.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on another episode of the HoCo Cyber Collective Podcast. I'm Colin Hamill, and today I have the honor of speaking with William Honablew Jr., the Community Impact Manager of the Baltimore City Office of Information Technology. William, welcome.
Thank you. It's really great to be here, Colin. How are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for visiting our virtual studio. Here, I found if I sit this way, it looks like we're talking to each other. It's very, very real. So, William and I have worked together for many years. We met, so William, what does the Community Impact Manager of Baltimore City do? What do you want? What do you do on a given day? What's your responsibility that you could share with us?
Well, I appreciate
And actually, a little bit of background also on who you are and what you do, just to kick that off.
No problem. I appreciate the question and the opportunity, Colin. As the Community Impact Manager, my role is primarily in our Office of Broadband and Digital Equity, BDE. What we do is that we focus externally on making sure that the community and residents in the community have the resources that they need to be fully included in our digital ecosystem. What that means is that part of my job is to make sure that our digital equity framework that we spend a lot of time on and got a lot of community feedback from people like Colin and other members of our community, that we follow that. That framework is focused primarily on equity and inclusion. If equity is the goal, inclusion is how we get there. Then we took the equity framework and we rolled that into our digital inclusion strategy that identifies a lot of the goals and the tactics and activities that we're going to be taking in order to close the digital divide. Addressing issues around some of our target populations, like older adults, people living with disabilities, homeless or unstably housed, and also racial and ethnic communities in the city. We realized very early on that the data suggested that if the city does not focus on these populations when there was an opportunity for investment in the digital ecosystem, that these are the populations and the people in the communities that would get left behind. So I go out to community association meetings, senior centers. I spend a lot of time talking to community members. We have our faith-based initiative where we're trying to make sure that we are engaging with organizations of faith because they are some of the lynchstones in many of our communities, especially many of our more vulnerable communities.
And actually, I'm glad you brought that up because this is one of the stories that I like you to share. It was a success where it was between a church and its community in a park and getting wireless. Could you just tell that story to everyone?
Absolutely. A church, St. Luke's in West Baltimore, they came and talked to us. One of their members, we met her at an outreach event at the Hartford Senior Center. And she came to talk to us about Wi-Fi, and they needed Wi-Fi in order to do a movie night. And they were really interested in doing this community outreach because the church was very, very active in the community. But this idea of doing this movie night was a really big deal to them and was going to be a way for them to really engage some of the members of the community that they had felt they hadn't really been able to get in contact with.
Definitely.
And so what we did is that I went out to the church and realized that some of the issue, while Wi-Fi was something that they struggled with, some of the issue was just them understanding the technology because they didn't understand how streaming worked. And so they thought that unless they had full Wi-Fi and all of these speeds and things like that, and they were having trouble with their current provider, then they wouldn't have been able to do it. So what I did is I contacted some of our partners at Comcast, and big shout out to Darian from Comcast. He came out and he was able to help get them the videos that they were looking for. I think I brought my projector. He brought his projector. I brought a screen, and they brought food and had a popcorn machine and what do you cotton candy machine.
That's
And
awesome.
50 people showed up. Well, I counted 50, but people kept coming in
Close
and out.
enough.
50
More than
people
one.
showed up.
Yeah, I think a lot of people showed up.
A lot of people showed up and they sat there and they watched, and little kids were playing and running around and having a good time. And that's the kind of thing that like feels great about the work that I get to do. It's not just about filling out reports and going to meetings and saying smart things to smart people and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's really finding solutions to help community members address real life problems,
Right.
and partnering with other organizations to do that. This is not something that we can do by ourselves. One of the things that we were very clear on, because let me be clear, our office was only created since 2020, 2021 during the pandemic. There was
Yep.
no Office of Broadband and Digital Equity before that.
Right.
Um, but when our office was created in response to opportunities for federal funding and the pandemic brought to people's attention just how significant the digital divide was and its implications in the very real lives of the people that we served, our office was created, and it's not just around again the budget and the bureaucracy of it all. We
Yep.
recognize that the city as an agency, we had a very unique role where we could pull people together. If we call a meeting, people will come to the meeting.
Right.
If the city says, "Hey, this is something that we want to do," people will take it a lot more seriously.
You can call people Comcast.
Yeah,
The church
yes, we
could
can.
not call Comcast outside of, I'd like home service, basically, and that's the extent of the Comcast relationship. You know people, and that's what I wanted to share the story because it was so beautiful. And just taking a step back,
Mhm.
you're discussing a church, a religious organization working in part with its local government, local and national businesses. Comcast is not a small business,
It is
but
not.
there were small businesses involved. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there was also some of the digital navigators were providing support. Could you
Yep.
speak a little bit about that? The digital
And
navigators
so
program?
after that event, what we realized is that there were also other digital needs, and that's really important. We don't just try to do these one-off events like, oh, look what we did. Let's take some pictures and post it
Yeah.
on our social media and get some press around it. It's like, well, these are entry points because what we're trying to do is build relationships because the relationships are the basis of the resiliency and the sustainability. Once we
Right.
do the movie night and it's all gone, then what happens next? How do we maintain those connections? And
Yep.
so, big shout out to Frances Muldrow from St. Luke's. She became a digital navigator. She started, and let me be clear, she didn't start by saying like, "Hey, do you all have some classes that I could take?" She said, "Hey, I have realized that some people in my community need help." When we had this conversation, when you came out, we talked to them about some of the technology that they had, and getting some Chromebooks, and people in her community were like, "Well, we don't know what to do. What's a Chromebook? Is that like a
What's a
laptop or
Chromebook?
is
Yeah.
that like a computer?" Like,
Made
and
of
and, and
Chrome.
again, no hate or no shade on anyone for not understanding, but that's what this is about.
Right.
This is about the opportunity to help people understand, to get beyond the limitations of their own experience and have brand new experiences.
I
And
couldn't
so
agree
Francis
more.
came.
Yeah. That's just great. And just the kindness and the importance of not, making fun of them for having the audacity to not immediately understand how to do something that's very confusing,
Absolutely.
you know.
And one of the challenges for people who what do they call them, tech natives, or people who have been trained in technology, is that you don't realize what life was like before people who did not grow up in that same way.
Well,
And
I
and
will agree with you, but I'll say the most millennial thing I can. Well, you'd be right, except that we are special. As a millennial, I do remember the time before. I remember, hey, mom, I'm going out. I'll see you when the lights come on. And if me and my friends didn't know something, we had to go to this place called a library and a encyclopedia. For any younger viewers, that's a printout of the internet, basically, that is set in stone, and we would look it up using the Dewey Decimal System in person,
you know,
or we
I
just
love the
moved
Dewey
on with our
Decimal System.
lives. I
I
remember that.
love
But
I love the Dewey Decimal System. I miss it.
well, hey, you know what? It's worked for how long now? Like,
About
I think
120
we in
years,
tech
yeah.
look to just, and actually, I'll speak. Let me throw my own profession under the bus. The buzzword in the for-profit big cyber industry is disruption. How can we disrupt a market and build market share funded 100% by venture capital so we are selling at a loss? Uber is a
Hmm.
perfect example. If everyone who remembers Uber in the early days, I remember getting like $6 cab rides. It was great. Now I use Uber when I get back from a business trip from the train station in downtown Baltimore. I live just north of Baltimore. I take 83 North. Each way, it's $34 for an Uber
Yep.
ride. And why is that? Because it's no longer being subsidized by venture capital. Uber is trying to actually make money now. Now that they have smashed apart the cabs that were there, now you don't not use Uber. It's or Lyft. Those are the two options, and they both are about the same price. There's no longer competition. They're great, but they're the incumbent now. They have become that which they disrupted. But disruption, when you talk about people, talk. So could you talk a little bit about the ACP, because that was something that was very near and dear in the digital equity work, and then could you segue that a little bit into this word sustainability? Like we had the DEI, there's an S now, and it's sustainability. Could you explain that concept as well?
There was a program called the Affordable Connectivity Program, or ACP. What that program was an opportunity from the federal government during the pandemic to help people who had challenges affording their internet service, and this would provide up to $30 uh, towards your internet service bill. So let's say you had the William Honablew Jr. Internet Service Program on that service plan, and it was $29.99. Well, that $30 would cover all of that. But let's say it was $80. Well, you get $30 toward it. Now, let me also be clear. Let's say you had a $15 plan, you wouldn't get the extra $15 back in your pocket.
Yeah, up to $30 off.
Yeah, it was up to $30 off. Except in Maryland, Maryland added an additional $15, so you would have up to
Go Maryland.
$45 off of your internet service bill.
That's
It
awesome.
was a
And
wonderful.
how many people were connected using this? Actually, could you share a little bit about the wow thing of what percentage of Baltimoreans did not have access to the internet full stop outside of the cellular, and how many people did you connect through this program that you're aware of?
Well, there were, I think at one point there were 100, and I think the eligibility, I'm trying to remember the number. I think it was 100 and some thousand people were eligible for the ACP program in a city of about 5 to 600,000. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And we were
I
able
think
to
it was
get.
like 40% of people at one point that I heard banning around. Just this is something that we people that live in the suburbs maybe don't understand. But it wasn't even a matter of like, well, I would like to get as a city rep. I lived in the city for 13 years, and if I wanted Verizon Fios as my internet provider, they would tell me to pound sand because they didn't offer it there, and the reason was they didn't want to run fiber. So my options were Comcast Xfinity or Dish, and that was
Yep.
it. And Comcast is really good at competing against satellite, not against
Okay.
Verizon Fios, but it wasn't even on the menu. So
Right.
that was just the main problem, is that there was no broadband option because, and I wonder if you agree with this. A lot of these problems also occur. I do a lot of work in the ag space, the rural parts of the state.
Mhm.
And I think it was 40% didn't have access in Baltimore, and it was like 25% in the rural areas. My theory was that it was not so much because of any sort of overt discrimination outside of there's no money in selling to these populations. They cannot afford the $200 a month, internet. So as a good capitalist, I don't even bother to target them, and that's a problem because no one cares for the business. What do you think of that impact?
Well, I think kind of cycling back around to the ACP program
Yeah,
itself. One of the challenges, one of the things was that it did have an impact in rural America as well.
right,
Um, that was one of the big issues, in the distinction between some of the issues that were in the cities and urban areas and some in the rural.
right,
The outcomes ended up being the same. There was
right,
still 30 to 40% of your population that did not have reasonable access or consistent access at what would be considered good speeds. You still
right,
had that, but the reasons why were different.
right,
In places like Baltimore City, some of the issues, like you just mentioned, was that there was a cost basis of getting it to that last mile from having the wires run right down the middle of the street and getting it to your home. Nobody wanted to spend that kind of money if you
tear
couldn't
up the roads. Yeah,
yeah, if you couldn't provide the level of profit that they were looking for. So they
Exactly.
didn't want to do that. But in the rural areas, some of the issue was that it was cost prohibitive for them to get it from a area of reasonably high concentration for that rural
Yeah.
area out to some of the places in the far parts of the other rural communities, particularly some of the farms
Yeah.
and some of the areas where there was large swaths of people,
Distances. Yeah.
large swaths of land between people. And then
Exactly.
there were questions about, do you run the fiber optic above ground or do you run it below ground? Because the cost was different, but also the risks were different. And so
Right.
all of these things played into the idea that people weren't signing up, and that when many of our populations, whether rural or urban, when many of them did sign up, a lot of times they did not have the income to maintain this over
Right.
time. And
Exactly.
so that's where the ACP kicked in, and the ACP was able then to just not pretend a lot that this did not have to do with not just making sure that people had the resources, but made sure that the companies, the internet service providers, could stabilize their income and make it profitable for them to go
Predictable.
into some of these areas.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
and so that was one of it. And I want to be clear, we don't begrudge private companies from getting profit.
Right.
That's not what we love that.
Yeah.
But we also recognize that there is a place, and it's kind of shifting at times, where you move from being profitable to being exploitive. And
Right.
therein lies the challenge. Making profit, that's what companies are supposed to do. They're supposed to maximize profit, but there should be an ethic on the other side that keeps these companies from exploiting people. And that again, like I said, is a shifting definition of
Well, I
where that
appreciate,
line
again,
is.
speaking as someone who has worked with state and local governments, but I've spent my entire career in, I guess I'll call it the private sector. I'm adept at selling to you, which means that for what it's worth, I understand the problems that you are suffering. And the thing that my thinking was the story about you created a really cool story that could be told about the community coming together, public, private, religious partnership. We got the trifecta there.
Mm-hmm.
That story that you told could have happened in St. Mary's County. And
Absolutely.
that's the beautiful part about it, is that um this is especially relevant for the faith-based things. It's one of the things that I noticed when I was on our monthly digital inclusion calls was the number of reverends and ministers that were on these calls, and I couldn't figure that out. So let me ask you this question that I ask other people. So, if you were to ask a typical farmer, regardless who that person is, and they're typically going to be an older adult, usually 50s,
Mm-hmm.
60s, 70s, 80s, and sometimes, who do you think they call in the event of a cyber emergency? I call it cyber 911. Who's their cyber 911 most often?
Oh, one of their grandkids or one of their children.
100%.
Absolutely.
If I asked you that about people that live in West Baltimore, who do you think their most typical cyber 911 is?
Most of the time for them, if they do have a child, it'll be them. But a lot of times they relate more closely to either their religious institution or someone at the local senior center.
Yep. So a community organization, or the answer that I got one time was their minister, and
Yes,
that's
yes.
why that it was a noticeable thing. I'm like, why are there so many like? And I asked the question, and then when I got the understanding, it was like, because you would agree that again, in a lot of parts of the inner city, the church is the religious institution is the focal point of the community, such as it is, and the beautiful moment of everyone coming together, we lost that during COVID lockdowns.
Yes.
You gave them something back that has been lost. You used technology, and you made stone soup, if I remember reading that book,
I
of
remember. Yes, I love it.
everybody brought something. Because when go figure, when did you know when human beings collaborate and cooperate, just like they say on like Sesame Street, that we can do amazing things? Well, they're not actually lying.
We
It's
are not.
true. It's just funny to actually we act surprised, like, I can't believe that everyone worked together to solve their problems with their neighbors. And it's like, why are we surprised? We are so jaded by this social media where what you describe is impossible. There would have been some troll that came in and ruined the whole thing by putting like an inappropriate movie on the
Right.
screen that was live streaming or something like that. You can't really do that in the real world very easily, or I should say it's more difficult and more dangerous for the perpetrator to do so. There are actual consequences when you're removed from again, it puts us, you know, as a millennial, I remember the value of community, of people,
Hmm.
not these thingies, not, I mean, right now, you and I are able to talk. Like you're in a different county than I am. It's easy for us to do this. I'm recording, right? I'm
Hmm.
recording. Oh, goody. Um, this would have been unthinkable before 10, 15 years ago. What we are doing
Right.
right now would have probably cost $250,000 for
Yep.
Baltimore City to set up in their own internal infrastructure.
Oh, wait, watch on that, on that. When I was in high school, I graduated from Potomac High School in Prince George's County. I was one of the first students in what they called their ITV program,
Oh,
interactive television. And it was housed out of Prince George's Community College, and they had the cables from local high schools. And again, I wasn't familiar with the technology at the time. They had the cabling from the local high schools, and we had the big TV camera pointed at the class, and there was another teacher at another school, and camera was pointed to her, and there would be all these students on these in these different classes, and it was like a Zoom room. Except you're right, the cost was
analog.
not your laptop and some software downloads. It was you had to, and the equipment had to be at a certain level in order to make any of this happen. And
I sold those systems. You're right. They weren't cheap to do, and if you and you can very easily do them wrong. Where it's just, I mean,
oh
how
yeah,
many people have gone into the brand new AV room and the sound won't play?
yep,
No one knows how to make the sound play, and we're
yep.
all just, we're thinking about how much hourly bill rate is sitting at a table because, remember when you used to go to in-person meetings and the table would fail to load? Yeah, I hate when that happened. Or just one person just was,
Yeah,
or
right.
they sound like they're on the moon, or someone is vacuuming, like walking in and vacuuming the carpet while you're having a meeting. Like the indignities that we've learned to put up with are just, the companies must love it. Like, yeah, we can offer a crap product and they'll continue to consume it. Um, so tell me again, what is it like in your role in Baltimore City IT? Is it exciting? Is it like, what is a day to day? What does a work week look like for you? To the extent that
um
you can share.
So uh, it depends on, some of it is what's happening, what type of resources and programmatic things that are going
Sure.
on. There were periods of time like there was an opportunity we received funding. The state received funding from the federal government and then gave it to Baltimore City to distribute Chromebooks. We initially got 30,000 Chromebooks to distribute, and we were doing so well from that distribution that they gave us an additional 20,000. So we ended up distributing 50,000 Chromebooks during that period of time. A lot of what I did was going out and trying to make sure that people knew what was going on, because there are a lot of times where these programs exist, these opportunities exist, funding may exist, resources may exist, and that the people who are in the most vulnerable circumstances don't even know that these programs and opportunities are there. And so
Well,
one
here's
of
a
the
perfect
things
example. How do you get someone that doesn't use email, doesn't use the internet, doesn't own a computer to find out about the program that would get them a computer? Like, how many of those Chromebooks did you give out? Was that the person's first computer they'd ever owned, in
uh,
their life?
there were many people, especially because the criteria for getting the Chromebooks, because of the state requirements, require people to be, I think it was like 300% of the federal poverty line for them to receive public benefits of some sort,
Right.
veterans and those types of basically the same qualifications for the Affordable Connectivity Program they were mirrored onto the Chromebook distribution program.
Okay.
And so that what you alluded to just now was one of the central components that really influenced how I do my job. Is the people that we're looking for are the ones that don't already have access.
Right.
If you already have access to email and you already have a device, I could just send you an email. If you're
Yeah.
already on social
You don't
media,
have email.
I could
What's your
just tell
email
you.
address? What's that? Okay.
Actually, and no, watch this. One of the things we found out was that you had, especially some of our older adults and people who were living in poverty, many of them had email addresses and did not know. Because, they would be like, hey, I just have my phone. And I was like, is it an Android phone? It's like, yeah, well, you have an email address. No, I don't. I've never had an email address. there is no way that you have this working phone and not have an email address. And then I would show them like, what is this? I didn't even know I had this email address.
What's all this? Whoa! And I'm sure there's probably like 50,000 unread messages of just all spam. That
right, and
hey,
but that's
I
part
got
of
$10 million. You know,
but that's part of the challenge that we had is that people were even with simple technology, simple with their phones, they were getting email addresses and they were signing up for things that they didn't really understand. So part of my job was to go to the community meetings, go to the senior centers, go to the rec centers, to go to places where people who do not have resources where they are. And one of the really important reasons to partner with faith-based organizations. One of the things that I'm so proud of our office and particularly, but the city in general, when we first got our office first kind of got underway, we did what's called our digital inclusion fund, digital equity fund. And what we did there, especially in that first cycle of our digital equity fund, was to fund organizations that had relationships with populations that we were trying to engage. If you already work with racial and ethnic minority communities, if you already work with people living with disabilities, if you already worked with older adults, if you already worked with people who are unstably housed or homeless, we wanted to make sure that we were supporting your area. And the funny part is that there were many of those organizations that were doing digital equity stuff, but never realized that it was digital equity stuff. They saw a need and they were helping people with the need. And
they
especially
already
during
solved it themselves, but no one had asked them about it.
right. So, they had situations where, they had people in their communities that needed to sign up for different benefits. How do you get your COVID mask? How do you get COVID test? How do you sign up for vaccines? A lot of that stuff was online and they didn't know how to get online or any of those things. So
Right.
that these organizations started working with them on how to get online, how to do these types of engagements, and not realizing that you are working to close the digital divide. And
Yep.
so they had figured out whose door do you knock on with a mask and get their attention? How do you go about really engaging these communities? And so we made sure that we funded them. We also did something very deliberate. We made sure that the range for funding, I think initially was between 10,000. I mean, actually, I think we started off with five, but no one really applied for $5,000 of grant funding. So I think it ended up being 25 to like 75, $85,000. The reason why is that above the $100,000 mark, that's a different type of application. Those tend to be different types of organizations. Those aren't necessarily the ones that are on the ground really working with individuals. Those are the ones that are moving either institutions
National.
or moving toward institutions, and they have infrastructure. They have that. We looked at that first generation of the digital equity fund as an opportunity to help grow the ecosystem, to help stir it, to help show people that we appreciated the work that was already done and that we honored that. And we wanted to make sure that we were going to build on the work that was already done, not come in and try to supplant to, hey, I know you'll have been doing this, but we're bringing this organization in and
Right.
ta-da, they're gonna do it. You can just sit down and
Fire
move.
all those people that have been doing this. We've solved the
Yeah.
problem for you.
And so again, very proud of Baltimore City putting people first in that kind of way, and recognize that if you really want to get engaged with individuals who don't have access, start talking to the people who already do things like that.
Yeah.
The one of the challenges that I see often is that when somebody has a new job or a new organization hits the ground, they behave like no one has done anything before they showed up. They have this, I'm coming in to come and save you guys because if clearly you all couldn't have been doing a good job because I wasn't there. And so now that I'm here, I'm going to come and change everything, blah blah blah, instead of really honoring the communities, because people were here before you got here
Well,
and people will be here after you're gone.
well, and to speak to that side, because allow me to give you my perspective as
Hmm.
someone who is on the corporate side of things and who is, we would look out for opportunity. So to us, this is one of the challenges of, again, the for-profit thing. To me, if I'm not the current vendor that sells to Baltimore City, what you just described as an opportunity that the new guy is going to want to put his stamp on there. We're going to whisper in his ear. That's the goal, that hopefully someone has a personal relationship. We're golf buddies. He's the godfather to my children. We go to the gym together. Something that
Hmm.
Now this is the preferred vendor. How do we transition between the two? There's that inefficiency is the profit that we
Yeah.
generate. Now, here's the thing. Sometimes, and I always prided myself, I always hated the concept of ripping something out that was working and replacing it with just a. I always, and that would vary for, again, in my role, I was the enterprise solutions architect, so it would vary based on who was doing the design. But for me, I
Mhm.
would look at what you guys already had, allow the understand what this guy's motivation is. He wants to make his mark, but not rip up to how many years worth of work, you know. And
Right.
speaking, and this is one of the things I like to segue to. Speaking of, not necessarily replacing the previous supplier. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Baltimore City ransomware attack. It was back in
Mhm.
2015, I believe, or was it 2016? I
I think
think
it was
was
16.
yeah. And to be clear, so you weren't there, but just could you speak to me? Just you have a very unique perspective on the event and just what you can share with us.
So I was still actually I was in the private sector during that time. I was the director of the Raymond V. Haysbert Center for Entrepreneurship during the time of the ransomware, I believe. And it was hard on a lot of the businesses that I supported and I served. And one of the big things was that there didn't seem to be any continuity planning for what happened in an event like that, where that digital infrastructure had been basically just removed and wasn't accessible, and people had to go back to pens and paper,
Right.
and there were loan applications and emails and things like that that just weren't able to get through. Since I've been on board, one of the things that I have noticed, well, not even noticed, actually very happy about, is that cybersecurity, and especially when it comes to things like phishing. And for those who may not understand, phishing is not where you throw a rod and try to actually catch like some sway or some whiting. Uh, what a phishing attempt is when they send you an email, just like they throw the bait in, it sends you an email, and that email looks like it's from someone you know. It looks like it's maybe from a colleague, it may be from someone, a family friend or something like that. And it normally has, and I've learned a lot of this about what some of the elements of phishing scams or attempts are from the trainings that we do internally. They have sense of urgency, where like, oh, I need you to do this as quickly as possible. I need this to happen within the next hour or so. We have to have this happen. It's from somebody that you know. And then they want you to either click on a link or download some file or some attachment. And
Something,
what
a,
that
a
does is
bad
that,
thing.
hmm?
Yeah. Get a bad thing,
Yeah,
basically.
a bad thing. And again, it seems in many cases it would seem normal or what have you. And when you click it, it compromises your machine and potentially your entire network.
Right.
And so what it does is it either allows the person who sent the phishing attempt to access your files. It allows them to take control over the network, get your password, access private information or sensitive information. It gives them potentially a lot of access. One of the things that happens now is that there is training and reporting on our phishing attempts. Big shout out to our interim CIO, Layla, in our Baltimore City Office of Information Technology, or BCIT, in our monthly meetings. She goes over the phishing training. She talks about and has people from our operation security area talk about how many people citywide have taken the trainings, what the results are, any retraining that's necessary, and those types of things. I like to say I have not in the phishing, and they send us phishing emails.
Right.
They send us emails that are designed to see what we're doing. Do we click the little phishing things like, hey, somebody should take a look at this? Or
Yep.
do we, oh no, let me just go ahead and click this. And it's like, oh,
You
somebody's
get on the
gonna
naughty
email
list if
you.
that happens.
Here's a link to a training that you now
Yeah.
have to do.
You need to take
Um,
a little remedial.
Right, and also as part of our professional development and our ongoing training, I want to say it's quarterly, and maybe if you don't pass them, you have to do it more often. But I pass them because I have deep-seated trust issues. So I assume that every email is an opportunity for somebody to take something that I like. And I don't want to have those problems. I
You
do
don't want
not
to be
want
in
to
the
be
news.
responsible for the next phishing thing. It's like, well, you know who did it?
Yeah.
It was William. No, thank you.
Your
I don't
picture's
want
up
that.
on the Baltimore Sun. This
No,
guy,
thank you.
this
No,
very
thank you.
specific person is patient zero. Well, it's
So,
interesting. One of the challenges of these ransomware attacks where we have to speculate, like in other words, I would imagine it would be difficult for anyone to answer the question of what was patient zero in the Baltimore City ransomware attack. And the reason
I
is
don't.
the things they do is they
Again.
clean up the
So,
logs, they delete everything right before
well,
they
it
execute the
depends.
attack.
So let me say this. It depends on. I would guess it because I don't do operation security,
Right,
but I do know that the people who run operation security, they are top flight, top notch, and I'm comfortable. They understand how this happened. They're able to run it back. Again,
sure,
that level of detail, and this is the other thing about operational security in many cases is that they may. So in another life, I used to practice law. And I know that there are certain things that, you don't want people to even know how you know, because
right.
then it provides the bad guys an opportunity to figure out how they should cover their
Operational
tracks.
security. You
Right.
know, how do you know
So
that? How do you know that I know? Because
so again, I am not part of that group, but I am comfortable that, well, one, on this side, watching the amount of training that they do and how they report and make sure that everybody is on board and understands the importance of training, understands
right,
the importance of the fishing, and it's part of our culture now,
right,
citywide. And one of the things that they talk about is like, it's unfortunate, but we now have that experience of ransomware. And it's been a few years, but it is an experience that has stayed with us. And so, that's that kind of that specter hanging around in the background. Make sure that we take that type of thing very seriously. And additionally, part of our ongoing training is how to make sure that we are not vulnerable. I remember one of the last trainings that I did wasn't about phishing, it was about social engineering. And people not just trying to send us emails and things like that now, but they do things like they'll leave a USB drive or a USB cable, like they'll leave it out,
there you
and
go. Just
people
plug.
pick
Can you
it
just
up.
plug this into your network real quick? I got
Well,
a
actually,
patient.
one of the things one of the examples they gave is like, somebody will see like a USB cable, like a USB-C or a USB, just a general cable, and you don't think that a cable could be an intrusion device, and you'll plug the cable in and hook it up to your printer or hook it up to your phone or whatever, and the next thing you know is that this now this cable has your device compromised. And so, again, why it's really important that, especially on machines where you keep sensitive information, that you don't just connect anything to it willy-nilly. That you make sure that your device is secure with the password, and that you're not connecting foreign attachments to it or foreign peripherals to your device. And being careful what networks you go to.
Yep. Well, let's see here. I'm sharing this. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
So this is just something I want to share because what you
Oh,
just described. So this is a company called hack5.org that if anyone is interested in the podcast, would like to have a penetration testing USB stick or a cable these are the actual for real tools that hackers and people who catch hackers, because this is the challenge, is that it's like a weapon like a knife or a gun or a club is not necessarily an evil tool. It depends on the pesky human that is wielding it. This is what, if you hear the term someone is doing like cybersecurity penetration testing, these are quite literally the tools. This is a USB stick that it has a battery inside and it will extract all of the information it can find. There are ways that I use this to test against my cyber security thing just to make sure it can actually detect these kinds of things. But this is the world that we're in. I also wanted to share if you heard about this. Were you aware that Leonardtown also had a similar style event as like Baltimore City did?
no, I didn't.
Here's the thing, because I was just thinking about all the things that you learn, everything, and thank you for sharing that. how cool would it be if there was a way to make like a white paper or a document that, again, in the corporate world, this sort of thing would be a white paper or a data sheet or a press release. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that that same mechanism exists in the government unless it's the personal initiative, or maybe not. I don't know. But
So and I can't speak to this directly, but I know the Maryland Municipal League and the Maryland Association of Counties, I know they have done symposia and also have committees around cybersecurity
yep.
and IT. So they may be doing something like that.
I
Because
would
I'm
bet
not in
I would bet
OPSEC.
a lot of money that they are. But the problem is, and I found this when I was working for a large corporate environment, it's the same thing
Mhm.
when you work for a large hierarchical organization like the government, like a big corporation, like a big nonprofit. There are roles, there are political considerations, there are security requirements. There are things that govern what we do, and they're usually. I think I introduced you to your counterpart basically in Westminster, where it turned out
Mhm.
that the same problems were happening in the slightly more rural counties, but there just wasn't a mechanism
Yeah.
to talk to each other. And one of the things that I'm very happy that I was hopefully able to contribute in part of these calls was I remember when this government federal funding and the discussion about was at first of making sure that Baltimore, in their words, got their fair share. As in, it was we are 24 individuals each holding a knife, and Hunger Games style, we will battle to get the largest percentage, and it is mine, it is not yours. The idea of working together to collectively build something using those resources, because I would bet there's probably 24 parallel efforts to solve these problems. And some of them maybe have solved problems that you have, and you
Mhm.
maybe have solved some problems that they have. If only there was a way to talk to each other. But I've come to understand sometimes that, well, they're competing with us. I'm not going to name names, but just like some of the business incubators, the idea that they have customers and these are my customers. Like I live
Right.
in Baltimore County, but my business incubator is in Howard County. Hence why it's the HoCo Cyber Collective. But me being from Baltimore County doesn't mean I'm less important. I have two locations and I have a vision of both Howard County, Baltimore County, as well as Maryland as a whole.
Yep.
And Baltimore City, since I lived there for 13 years, I have a soft spot and an understanding because I also read that Baltimore City is not the only municipal. We were one of the first, as we in Baltimore tend to do. We tend to show the way of how things can go. But how cool would it be if there was a way that you could share what you just told me outside of this podcast, obviously,
No,
that
the podcast is awesome.
we're going to reach an audience of dozens potentially, but the if there was just a way, because or figure out, and that'll be something we'll take offline. You and I are going to go on a quest to find these names, and we're going
Oh,
to email them and
actually,
figure it out.
let me give you some right now. The Maryland Digital Equity Coalition, they are doing a wonderful job, and the Maryland Digital Opportunity Summit is October 15th, 2005 in Montgomery County.
Okay.
We'll be down there for that. And also big shout out to Ronnie and Vishnu and their team at the Office of Statewide Broadband.
Yep.
And they're under, I think, the Department of Housing and Community Development. Yeah, I think they're under, yeah. And they've been doing a really wonderful job. Now, granted, their resources and infrastructure have been hampered by the changes in priority at the federal level. I will say that.
Yes. As some of you
Um,
may have heard, priorities around grant funding. There's some different opinions around that topic. And which brings us to the S, the
yes.
sustainability, which would you, if you, I would, I just if you would agree with it. It's basically answering the how do we pay for this? What happens hypothetically if the ACP was to go away? How do we keep doing all these wonderful
Oh,
things even if
the
the
ACP
initial
went
grant is
away.
gone? It did. I know it did go away, but that's the
Yeah,
problem.
but that's actually a really great example of what we're talking about. And
Right.
so when you talk about the sustainability, so taking a step back, when we were talking about, and I was out with I think I was at one of the Housing Authority of Baltimore City properties, registering people for the ACP, again, the Affordable Connectivity Program. And one of the women there, she said, baby, how long you been working here? And I was like, uh-oh. Whenever an older Black woman calls you baby, something is about to be amiss. And I was like, I think by that point I'd been there maybe 10 months or so. And she said, I've seen people like you, say no disrespect to you, but I've seen people like you come and they have really great ideas about what's going to happen. And then we get excited, we fill out all the forms and we do all the things. And then the program just disappears. It's like, what do I do after that? And I was stuck because, and come to find out, she was absolutely right.
Yeah.
But at that point, the fact that it was affecting rural and urban communities and suburban communities, and when I tell you people were on the uptake on this program nationally, there
Yeah.
literally was no one aside from a few apparently quite powerful people who called, were concerned about the DEI nature and the giving away and who's going to pay for this, that crowd. It
Yeah.
was actually helping people across the United States, regardless of party affiliation, regardless of demographic, regardless of location. It was helping millions of people across the United States. And so in my mind, I could not fathom that they wouldn't renew this program. And
Right.
especially when you looked at the cost per person versus the value received and the stability that it provided for some of the people who were complaining about their largest contributors, the Comcast, the
Right.
Spectrums, and Charter Communication. Is like I could not conceive of it. But what I told her was that notwithstanding whether this program continues in perpetuity, get the discount now. Focus on what we can get now. If it lasts forever, you won huge. But
Yeah.
if it
A
doesn't,
winning lottery ticket.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, you can use the next $300, $400, right? Unless
Yeah.
you just got an extra $300, $400 that you're just comfortable paying. Get this registration now,
This is
so that
literally getting your taxpayer money back to the taxpayers. Like for
right,
reals, the actual taxpayer is
right,
benefiting here in a tangible and more importantly measurable way. That you can say that we hooked up 50,000 new people, which is that feeds into workforce development. That
absolutely.
works into competitiveness of Baltimore City as a urban center for attracting businesses. You know,
And
there's a lot of
for a lot
good
of the
that comes
people,
out
for
of
a
it.
lot of the people that we serve, um, 30 to $45 literally is a copay for medicine.
Yeah,
Like with having to choose between keeping the internet on and getting insulin or getting your cardiac
yeah,
medicine. Like
exactly.
that's a choice, and take that while you can. And it goes to the further point of sustainability. As we're looking, excuse me, at sustainability, there's a couple of ways to look at it. One, the way that we did initially with, as I mentioned before, our digital equity fund cycle one, where we look at investing in organizations that have already started doing the work and use that investment, those grant funds, to expand their capacity and their technical ability to do that. Why does that matter? Because they were doing the work before and they're going to continue to do it anyway.
Yeah,
As I mentioned before,
you're
I used
wasting
to
money
do,
otherwise. You're
right.
duplicating and you're competing with them too. That's where you run into the whole like, well, this is mine, so I'm not doing yours. That you
Right.
could just avoid that fight and get an ally instead.
As I mentioned before, I used to I started the entrepreneurship center in one of the entrepreneurship centers in Baltimore City. And that money came when there was a crisis and a lot of federal funding rolled into Baltimore. And then when the crisis was in somebody else's city, that federal funding rolled out of Baltimore City. But guess what? I'm still here though. And
Right.
so one of the things that happens is that I still do some of these business development, and I volunteer with some of these local organizations to teach entrepreneurship, to teach and help people write business plans and stuff like that. So that money that was invested in scaling up and doing those things, it is still having an impact on the community, even though that actual money has moved on to other jurisdictions. So
Right.
that's one, invest in people that are already doing the work and in organizations that are doing the work. The second is during my time with the Entrepreneurship Center, we would talk to institutions and try to find out why they weren't doing business with nonprofits and small businesses and things like that. What we heard often was that, well, they're not prepared. They don't have the right, they haven't done this, they don't have this insurance, they don't understand this, their accounting isn't up to par and things like that. And so one of the things our office is doing, well, we were going to be doing it because there was some grant funding before the federal government took it, but separate issue. But
Let's talk
because
about the good we have done so far. So yeah.
But what we're doing is that we're working with some of our partners in the Mayor's Office of Small Minority Business Advocacy and Development, some of our other partners, and some of our other partners in the nonprofit sector, and some of our partners in the finance sector, to pull a lot of this information together and help develop the capacity for some of the providers in the digital ecosystem, so those are no longer issues that they have. That
Right.
they understand the difference between an MOU and an agreement and which is appropriate to use when.
And
How to make sure that gap is a real thing that they do when they're looking at their accounting systems and understanding
just for
the
our viewers
generally
that don't
accepted
know what
accounting
gap, he's not talking
principles.
about the store generally
No,
accepted
that's why I
accounting
had to say, wait,
practices,
gap the generally accepted accounting principles. How to
not the
make sure
store.
that they are in compliance with that, understanding how to use what insurance is effective and how to utilize it for risk mitigation, and also how to do effective evaluation so that you can report the things that your funders are looking for. We're also been big shout out to Kenya Osley, the director of the Office of Broadband and Digital Equity, and Whitney Moray. Um, they are out talking to the philanthropic community, not like, hey, could you give us money? And by the way, hey, could you give us money? Because
Right.
there's still more work to do. But more so to talk to them about what are you all looking for? Because the reality is that no matter how austere these times are going to be, no matter the dearth of resources and opportunities that exist right now, that is going to change.
Yep.
If you look at recessions and you looked at all the financial downturns when all of the previous bubbles have popped, one of the things that you find is that after each, there are certain types of businesses that survive the pop, and there are certain ones that thrive after the pop when there's a resurgence. And there is work that can be done during those times so that you can prepare to make sure that your organization is resilient in the face
Oh,
of those types of challenges. Right now, I am comfortable that we are outside of daggone near everybody's 5 year time frame. Like whatever your plan 5 year plan was 5 years ago, we are not it. Like this falls outside of it, and so sustainability is important. But when the economy shifts, when society shifts, when technology shifts, then there needs to be a focus on resilience. How, because we don't control a lot of the things that are happening around us. I guarantee you I don't, because things would look a lot different if I did.
right.
But because things are, since I don't control it, since I don't have significant influence or input on the way things are going to go nationally, hell, even
Right.
locally, what I'm going to focus on, what do I do with me? What do I do with my resources, my tribe, my people, my communities, the digital ecosystem that I am a part of? How do I prepare that so that when things do ease up, that we are all prepared, where we understand not just how to collaborate theoretically, like, oh, I know Colin, and Colin and I are cool, and so we can partner. No, no, no. Does Colin have the right insurance? Does Colin have the right capacity? Does Colin, like, do I have the right? What happens? Is this the partnership where it is mission critical that is Colin and William to make this partnership happen, or is it okay that it's Baltimore City and Colin, or is it Colin's company and it? How do those things work? Having those types of granular conversations so that we're positioned that when the funding does come, because it will, I can't tell you when, but I
Right.
guarantee you that it will come back. Making sure that we're prepared for it. And the other part of it too is recognizing, and I've had to have this conversation with members of our ecosystem, recognizing that there are members of our ecosystem who will not survive this downturn. There are organizations that will not be here. They will not be, resilience is not part of the conversation for them because they will not exist. And the question becomes, what do the rest of us do with them? Do we just stop and mourn? And it's like, oh, let's watch them fade into oblivion and stand off, or do we say,
Just like, is it
hey,
worth, saving or arresting or coming together as a community to save like a local business as opposed to, because that resonates with me is like, I wanted to make sure that what we didn't do with all these millions of dollars that we had of funding, like this is a once in a 10-year opportunity, was, and I say this speaking as I previously worked for a multi-billion-dollar corporation where we want that money to go to the big guys, which means it goes out of the state into somebody else's. But how cool would it be if we can put that money into the corner computer repair shop or the community center, which is supported by grants and also with community donations or something? And let's be frank, we are providing services to people who are poor. It's the same.
Yes.
The what you talked about with the Chromebooks. The story that I heard was, especially during COVID, when everything shut up and the school shut down and the schools went remote, there was this assumption, call it privilege if you will, that, oh, just log on to your home computer, and
Yep.
that it turned out not only in Baltimore City, but very interestingly, once again, in the rural communities, they were distributing laptops because in many cases, this was quite literally the first computer that this family had ever owned. And the point that I made is that like poverty exists in urban areas, poverty exists in rural areas. The as you said, the symptoms and the outputs are the outcomes are the same, but the problems are they're just different. They don't live in, you know, run down row homes. They live in double wides that are
Yep.
off of that, by the way, are 20 miles away from the nearest grocery store. So unless you own a car, when I live in Baltimore City, say what you will about Baltimore City, but at least you can walk. I can walk to Raven Stadium if I want to, and I'm willing to
Hmm.
walk a few miles. If you live out in the sticks and it's 30 miles to get to the nearest grocery store and you don't own a car, I had to explain this to my mother-in-law who's from New York. There is no Uber. There's no Uber Eats. Like, what do
Yeah.
you mean? Like, you just can't, like, the app doesn't work. Like, you open it up and there's nothing on the menu is empty, and she just couldn't wrap her head around that digital. But the good news is, and I'm hoping that as part of this initiative of building, the Howard County and the Baltimore City, just I'm trying to help all the counties. I'm hoping to be the friend of all, because there's value in working together. Baltimore City is right next to Howard County. You're in right DC, Baltimore DC corridor. Howard County is right in the middle of it, and
Hmm.
they have urban areas. They have it. We're part of the same team. We all have the same awesome state flag that we can objectively agree is one of the best.
One of the
Um,
best, absolutely.
I wanted to, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to share something real quick that I made because you were
Awesome.
talking about teaching older adults about fishing, and this is very relevant. So you and I are in this narrow slice of humanity where I'm wondering if you'll understand this. But I want here just this will be this will be a clip of William reacts to Colin's presentation. So I'm just gonna
Okay, cool.
hit play here.
Boss, I'm telling you, there's a new racket hitting the streets. It's called fishing, see?
Fishing. What are we? Opening a bait shop now? What's next? Worms in the safe, see?
Not that kind of fishing, boss. This is through the electrical letters. You send a note that looks real classy, like it's from the bank. The poor saps hand over their dough faster than a mark at a shell game.
So, let me get this straight. You don't crack a safe, you don't stick up a joint, you just ask them and they cough up the loot?
Exactly, boss. One click and you're swimming in suckers. Yeah, see?
Listen, boys, that ain't a score, that's a scam. Only a mug falls for that kind of grift. And anybody listening out there, don't be a mug. If some so-called banker asks for your password in an electrical letter, you slam the door faster than we scram from a raid, see?
That's funny. That's funny. You're going back to a previous era of a certain type of movie they don't really play anymore. I remember when
But you
James
know
Bond
who
should have
grew
been
up
gangster.
watching those movies?
Hmm?
Do you know who grew up watching those movies?
A lot of the people that you'll be targeting, the older adults and the seniors.
Exactly. And this was the hardest thing. So I asked this. I sent this to my mom, my dad, my in-laws, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law literally laughed for like 5 minutes because they're from New York. This was good. My mom laughed because she's a fan of movies. My dad thought it was an insult to potentially to his generation because he didn't used to watch movies. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I missed the mark a little bit there. But it turns out if you watch movies, so I'll ask you a question. Do you watch this kind of movie?
Not anymore.
Did you?
When I do spend time with my mom, like I am, we still watch Petticoat Junction, and then we'll tap out at Star Trek: The Next Generation. So we
There you
run that
go.
gamut.
So the younger people I found, and I don't, I'm young adjacent, but like the Zoomers, if you will, the youngins, they have no idea who these weirdos are. What are they
Oh
talking
no,
about? And
no.
do you know why I know about this? Because I didn't used to watch these kind of movies.
What so?
Bugs Bunny.
Ah, yes, 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 yes. Ah, see.
How many did you watch
Yeah.
Bugs Bunny growing up?
Yes,
That's where you know
absolutely.
it too. And there were these things where you can tell where like a drawing, like a character is like it's like too specific, like it's a caricature of
Mm-hmm.
somebody, but I have
Mm-hmm.
absolutely no idea because it's like Peter Lorre or something like that is the creepy looking guy from the 30s.
Yes.
You'll
Yes.
know him if he's like, like I asked
Ah,
like
see.
we were in Disney at Hollywood Studios where they have like the old style Hollywood and they had a billboard where it had again like five of these like these are caricatures of people I don't know and I'm like, Mom, do you know who those people are? She's like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, they're real. I thought they were just made up. Like, no, these are real caricatures from the 30s and 40s. Why does my mom know them? Because she grew up with them.
Right.
Um,
Made watch the movies.
and I'll ask you, do you know who Dick Tracy is?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you know who
He
Dick
he
Tracy is?
he he
Oh
was
yeah, he's an iWatch. It was the
he was the
easiest
first iWatch
iPhone in the
wearer.
world.
He had the smartwatch before smartwatches were smart.
Well, here's the question: why do you know who Dick Tracy is?
Comic books. I
Okay, you
used to
read the
collect.
comic books.
Yeah, I used to
You
collect
remember the
comic books when I was
1990
younger.
movie,
Huh?
the William Betty or Ned Beatty, the movie in
Oh
1990?
yes, 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 yes. There was a movie. He had the yellow coat on, and yeah, there was a movie.
There
Yes,
was
I
I
do
was
remember
10
that.
years old when I was no, it was 1990, so I was 8 years old. Why on God's green earth do I know who Dick Tracy is? I did read the comic book pages. Again, I remember the time before, but most baby boomers read the comics in like the 30s. And
Yep.
growing up, it's suddenly that most baby boomers know who Dick Tracy is. And I asked like what a video game was to them. Pong, by the way, was the answer that most baby boomers are going to know that video game if you're trying to make metaphors about it.
Yeah, and
Um,
that was when they were adults.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So you're and the hardest part about making this video was making a pop culture reference effectively to an era that I did not live through. I'm very likely to make a fool of myself, frankly, saying things wrong. Like you could know, like if someone comes into your neighborhood and tries to act as though they are part of it and they're using words wrong,
Yep.
you're gonna probably want to make fun of that person or play along to see how far they go before you
Yep.
you you know.
How deep down the rabbit hole are you
Oh, this
going?
is gonna be fun. Let's see how much of a lie this person is willing to tell. So this thought I wanted to bounce it off of you is that what if we made this is by the way that was all generated 100% by AI. The script
Mm-hmm.
was AI. I found images online that I just took of the name. I asked my parents and my in-laws before I did this, like, what are I asked them, and I'll ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
What is the name of an actor that if I said, think of a movie villain, what is the name of the first actor that pops in your head? Or the first few? Or if you watch movies like I do? Who is an actor that's
Movie
known
villain
for
Lex
villainous?
Luthor, and Lex Luthor not just because I saw the
The
recent
name of the
Superman,
actual
but
actor, though.
oh
Like Christopher Walken is known for playing like
yes.
complicated psychopaths, but for like a bad guy. Like who the guy who's playing like a movie needs a good bad guy, would you agree? That like who is
Oh,
the
absolutely. Because the bad guy helps to define the nature and the
Darth Vader,
capacity of the
basically. Yeah.
hero. Without a
But who's the actor
without
that
a
pops in
good
your head?
bad guy, it's fairly silly.
There's no such thing. Again, it's the polyglot. We can say what we want. On the
That's so funny.
is poking.
The one that comes to mind, the predominant right now, is Josh Brolin, because as Thanos, he did such a phenomenal job.
Yeah.
And again, the writing for that entire phase of the MCU was really
That's a
defined by
good answer.
Thanos.
So what I've learned, and this is a theory that I'm sort of, I guess if I had majored in film studies, except I majored in computer science, just that you've watched Star Wars, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, I am your father. How much information did I just use the Force, Luke? How much so use the Force, Luke. That's 4 words. How much information did I just transmit to you or trigger in you?
Actually, that not just in film, but also in psychology, and also if you study destructive cults, side project.
We can learn a lot from destructive cults. What if we use their mind control for good?
Yes. Don't use powers for evil.
Don't use the power for evil. Use it for good.
But like they do the same things. They tie into things. And actually, one of the things that I used to teach for a little while, and I still incorporate it in some of my classes, is the use of psychographics and psychological and that type of programming when doing marketing and things like that.
Yep. My buddy John Amy, who I know is listening to this podcast. Hey, John, shout out. He's my loyal listener who's given it all. He told me that growing up that me and some of our scout friends, like we would just talk in code. Like if you watch The Simpsons, if you watch Monty Python, if you watched Mel Brooks movies, you would understand everything. And if you didn't watch those movies, like when I first met my now wife, I asked her again, nerdy guy. I don't know if it shows, but typically I wasn't the most interesting person to talk to, but I got one of the techie girls, and so lucky me. But she hadn't seen a lot of these movies that I love. She hadn't seen the Ghostbusters movies. She hadn't seen any Indiana Jones movies. She hadn't watched the entire Star Wars trilogy, the original one. And I'm like, okay, here's a list of movies that I need you to watch with me. I will cheerfully watch these movies again. And this is how I know she was a keeper, because she watched the movies and now she understands the references. But I guess I'll ask, what's your favorite movie? And I'm hoping it's one that or just a movie that you think I might have seen before that you like and are very familiar with.
My favorite movie is a movie with Robin Williams called What Dreams May Come.
Okay.
Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr.
That's the one where he is killed in a car crash. He goes to heaven and he's trying to get his wife back and stuff like that. Okay.
Yep. One of my favorite movies.
Luckily, it's not like a deep, dark movie or anything like that. Do you have another one that you could get? I could maybe do that one, but that's a little bit complicated.
You brought up Mel Brooks for Blazing Saddles and The Princess Bride. Well, Princess Bride is not Mel Brooks.
Perfect example. Okay. So do you remember Blazing Saddles? And I got to be very careful here that we're not going to violate restrictions here. And my son is not going to learn new words. So I will use Blazing Saddles to explain my guard tower cybersecurity platform to you and the value of its AI decoys. Do you remember in Blazing Saddles when the bad guys, like all the KKK, the evil people, were all riding into town and they built a fake town that wasn't real? And what did it do? It drew the bad guys away from Red Rock to fake Red Rock, where they were burning it down. It was great. And then they realized that, oh, this is nothing. Now, if it were me, that's when like the artillery strike would be called in on there, where they have notified. So here's the example, is that the bad guys have now notified you of where they are. Where I would say is that that's where the good guys spring their trap on them. And that's how Guard Tower is the fake Red Rock. Now, does that make sense to you?
That does. I like it.
Hopefully a lot of people watch Blazing Saddles because now they understand Guard Tower as well. Now how much more efficient was that?
Blazing Saddles, go do that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. It was made in a previous time, but I would tell you to not, it's got some language that we shouldn't repeat here. But it's important. It's meant to actually, Mel Brooks said he meant to.
A hilarious movie. Hilarious.
It was.
Hilarious.
I know, it's a fantastic movie. So that's just the idea on there. So, but if we made like a series of those, what was the other attack you said? Phishing attacks and
Social engineering.
so imagine. So that's what the series was. I created two AI voices. That one's called the boss, the other one's called the henchman. And so all I have to do is I use ChatGPT and just generate that script. I can tweak it and just generate the individual lines. I put them together in Microsoft PowerPoint. And that was like what, a 45-second video that we could make a whole series of those. So the idea was like that to have these, these are the bad guys, them discovering modern crimes like identity theft. So what's identity theft? Well, boss, it's where you pretend to be somebody else. You put on a little mask and you walk into the bank and you take out a mortgage in their name. How the heck did they do that? How do people fall for this sort of thing? All you got to do is check your, and then give a useful piece of advice. Don't be a mug. Which again, I don't know if that's like slang that existed. It sounded like it.
So funny.
It sounds to a millennial's opinion of what slang sounded like.
That I love those parts. Like that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, see?
Like, yeah.
Y'all had no tail, see? Man, we're bootlegging. Crime was different back then, and there was no DJ, there was no internet, no cell phones. They were just living their lives. I love the joke, like robbing a bank in the you know how easy it was to get away with bank robbery in the 40s? As long as you weren't physically there when the police got there, you were like 99% likely to get away with it, basically. So William, just trying to wrap things up, because again, be very thankful for your generous your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us, or advice you could give for people that are, or to your counterparts, like to people that are in, other big cities that have struggled with this, that probably have the exact same problems? Is there any piece of advice you would give?
The biggest piece of advice is to make sure that you listen to the residents that you serve.
Yep.
There is nothing worse than sitting in a room full of well-meaning people talking to each other, coming up with some incredible plans that sound good on paper, and them having no real import or impact or represent the need as is understood by the people that you're trying to serve.
It's the or as what happens sometimes, there needs to be the department of say the acronym out loud. Let's see, the Social Hierarchy Integration Team. The Shit Coalition is going to be meeting now.
There's a YouTuber, I think TikTok, YouTube. She's on multiple socials. She covers what they call bad designs, and one of her biggest and best pieces of advice is make sure that before you send out any marketing, you have a focus group of 13-year-old boys.
Can you share with me, if you don't mind, I don't want to make anyone look bad, but the concern you had about that acronym and the community impact, because I definitely found that very amusing.
Well, one of the things that and actually that goes to our email address. It's bde@baltimorecity.gov, and again, that's BDE.
Got some real swagger with that email address right there. Like, wow, that's a bold.
Yeah, we want to keep it simple. BDE@baltimorecity.gov. And when you email us, I would not necessarily recommend that you Google BDE because depending on
you're going to learn some things, and it will not mean
may not come up with digital equity. That might not be what you come up with. But if you also want to follow us on socials, on all social media platforms except for Instagram, we're Baltimore City IT. On Instagram, we're BaltimoreCity.it. So that's
and our secondary channel is BDE69420@baltimore.com. It's we're playing to the younger generation here.
So yeah.
And that's just something, again, we laugh about it, but it's just one of those things that to me seems so obvious. Just because having a business, I had to name Sentinel Forge Technologies, SFT. This was my wife actually was the one who came up with it. And she was like, yes, like safety. I'm like, what? SFT? I'm like, oh wow. Well, that was a happy acronym. And then I Googled SFT to make sure it wasn't like some like white supremacy organization or some like Nazi group. Like, again, we have Google. You can Google these things. You can save so much heartache by just using the Google.
Use the
People don't
tools
think
that are
about it.
available to you.
So you spend millions of, I mean, imagine how much money could be spent by a lot of these organizations where we're having a good laugh, but the consequences of coming up with a name that is at best counterproductive and funny and outright offensive,
Mm-hmm.
think about how bad it is if the acronym ends up being a slur to your
Right,
target.
absolutely. And
I mean,
again,
you know, perfect
that's why
example
it's
that,
important.
I don't take anything personal here, but I am a person of Irish descent, and my business incubator is the Maryland Innovation Center, the MIC, and they will cheerfully
Mm-hmm.
call it the MIC. And again, a fourth generation, we came here in like the 1850s and stuff like that, so I don't take offense, but it's like, I don't think anyone realizes
Yeah,
that,
they
like,
didn't understand
my great
the
grandfather would be
sense of
very
education.
unhappy with you if you told him the name of the organization that his great grandson is a member of, and we don't think
Right,
about these things. So
absolutely. Cultural competence is a real thing.
yeah, and just I guess actually one more question I wanted to ask because it just popped in my head. You brought up digital equity, and I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to have this be political, but we will agree that that is one of those words that has become, if at best, charged. Depending on who you say that to, that means very
Mm-hmm.
different things.
Yes.
Everyone has an institutional language. This is not something that's specific to liberals or conservatives or Republicans or Democrats. We all have our own jargon. We all have our own terminology.
Mm-hmm.
If you were seeking to collaborate with your counterpart in like Hagerstown,
Mm-hmm.
far out west, very,
Mm-hmm.
very different, still an urban area, but
Mm-hmm.
in the mountains, this is in the rural part, very different considerations on there. What would be advice to how to speak to that person in a way that, and even though it might seem silly to us, like we call digital equity, get over it. I find that whenever you have to say get over it, that's profoundly counterproductive to the person that you're
Absolutely.
trying to work with and partner with. What would be some of your advice you might have to ways to streamline that communication? If that question makes sense?
Yeah, so one of the ways that it's not so much about streamlining the communication, it's clarifying the communication.
Yep.
Because what you identified was that the cultural context or the social context around these words govern people's understanding. The same way that you're
Right.
talking about for older adults anchoring it into some of the movies and TV shows and what was pop culture at the time for them.
Right.
Having that same type of conversation when you are talking to the person that you're engaging with. Take an opportunity to, and again, depends on the relationship that you have with them, and how deep and how comfortable you are and how patient they are with this
Right.
engagement. Getting them to work with you to define that word and what you're doing, getting them to understand the work that you're doing, and also everybody being clear that there are certain things that just don't align. If
Yeah.
like for us, if regardless of what we call it, if you are not interested in working to the agency and liberation of the people that we're serving, then you're not aligned with the work that we're doing, no matter what we call it, whether we call it
Right.
digital
Right.
inclusion, digital equity, digital opportunity. If the work is still
Call
going
it
to be
digital equality if it makes you feel better. I mean,
right,
that's the thing. It's like we understand what you mean,
and it
and
is, but that's the thing. You can't assume that they understand what you mean. That's why it's
exactly.
important in
That's
your community for you all to establish a baseline of what it is that you're talking about.
yep.
And again, focus on the work. If the work is designed to benefit the individuals that you're serving in the community, presumably everybody in the community should want to be on board, or presumably they'll be on board with
Right.
that work because it's serving their community. And if you can get beyond the vocabulary
Right.
and also be open to hearing what that vocabulary means to them. Just because it has a very specific meaning to you, and that a benign meaning or even a positive meaning,
Right.
does not mean that it has the same thing. And it really is about coming to a consensus on how you move forward. Now, again, if you're in a space where they're using language that is harmful to other members of the community, that's a different lane for me. But again, it is not so much streamlining and just trying to get beyond it. It
Right.
is, and that's we talked a little bit earlier about my job, and that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is trying to develop understanding. Is trying to figure out what is it that we're actually all just talking about? What vocabulary, between code switching, vocabulary, and things like
Right.
that, switching things up so that I can get to level of understanding with you, not patronizingly, but to have a genuine understanding where I'm not trying to pretend I understand. I want to genuinely know. And I want to have a space where I can be like, well, no, I don't get it. And are you comfortable working with me some more so that I can?
One of the things I really like about the podcast, as opposed to, I guess, I'll use the jargon, the traditional media, the mainstream media, where we have to, our conversation at this point has gone on for a while.
Oh,
If
wow.
we
Yeah.
had to cram everything we just said into 2 minutes, it almost forces us to use jargon. And then in doing so, our 2 minute statement to someone who doesn't speak, we might as well be speaking in French because they do not understand what they are saying. And they're listening to something in Spanish. And the Spanish don't like the French or something like that. And they're getting, just thinking about through our conversation and to give us something to build on, I'll ask you, would you be willing, if I could reach out to some churches or faith organizations that are in St. Mary's County that are near where like my parents live, like Catholic churches or things that have things like weekly dinners, they have thrift stores. I have to imagine they must have something similar. Would you be willing to introduce them, or if I can get people to
Oh,
hear the
absolutely.
story of what was the church again that did this?
St. Luke's.
Saint what?
St. Luke's.
St. Luke's. Would St. Luke's, I would ask, be willing to talk to their fellow, and here it might be Catholics and Protestants talking together to solve.
Absolutely.
We're gonna
Eh,
we're gonna solve this problem that's ever since Martin Luther back in the day. Luckily we have low expectations, but again, faith-based organizations
yes.
that I
Be
think
more than happy to
resonates
do that.
very much with rural areas or the more red areas where if you approach them in that way, I think first off, everyone I've told that is shocked. I asked the farmers, because surprisingly, a lot of them don't know people in West Baltimore either. um, they have certain preconceptions about Baltimore
Hmm.
City that are informed by media, such as The
Yeah.
Wire, which again, as a longtime resident of Baltimore City, that was a frustration. Like, no, my house is not like The Wire.
Yes.
That's on the
That
west
was
side. We just
problematic.
don't go to that part.
So,
But they would guess family member or something like that, but they were blown away when I said minister. And I'm pretty sure again that these are again a population that goes to church, that their
mhm,
faith is central.
to
I
their
think
identity.
that we can find other things to talk about where we just talked about our faith or lack thereof. Or, this also works with Jewish organizations, that are part of this sort of thing. Like the thing that has always been my North Star, and frankly, the reason why I was the one of the few people in cybersecurity that actually bothered to show up for this digital equity stuff, is that it's the right thing to do.
Yep.
It is the right thing to do. And as an ambassador to West Baltimore and a traditionally black community, I'm not necessarily the best spokesperson, but you are. You can
Right.
talk to that community in a way, there's trust issues, there's communication, cultural issues that
Mhm.
I might, even my best meaning effort could still say something wrong. That's where I turn to people like you, who's been a partner and friend, who will, guide me, like, don't call it the BDE or things like that, where you understand the vernacular,
Mhm.
um, and tell me not to call certain things, because again, and meet me in a place of common brotherhood and understanding, where we understand that at the end of the day, who our opponents are. It's not the people in the rural communities. It's the blankety blank hackers that are preying on our grandparents. All of our
Absolutely.
grandparents,
They
our
want they
parents,
want
they
our
are
grandparents
stealing
free.
our.
They don't care about our jurisdictions. They don't care
No,
about our political stripes or anything like that.
exactly.
They care about getting the money. They
They're
care about
criminals.
stealing.
They stole my mom's identity. That's a story I can tell anybody. Everybody's got a mother. You went after my mom. You understand how I feel as a son about the individual who did that and what I
Yep.
wish would happen to him.
Absolutely.
But anyway, I think that's a great thing. Is there anything else you want to talk about, William? Or actually talk about your podcast. You have a podcast, or this
Um,
apparently is a not uncommon thing I'm learning.
No, actually, I have been working with a couple of other organizations and doing podcasts. A organization in Baltimore City called Dos Migos, the Better Way for Business Network, and MAPS. And I want to say I just recently started working with MAPS. We haven't even done a pilot episode yet, so can't remember what MAPS stands for off the top of my head.
Feels like
But
it's an
yeah,
important thing.
as we get more episodes or as we start doing pilots and stuff like that, I will make sure that I share them with you so that
Yeah.
you can share them with others.
Well, and I will offer if you need a guest. Thank you so much for being very generous with your time. Again, William Honablew, thank you for sharing an insight. And I'm glad we had that conversation around the word equity because you articulated a frustration I have, which was we're fighting about the word and not what our intent is. And we're so caught up, both sides are caught up on the word that we are calling the thing. That
Yes.
I think we can agree with protecting our grandparents and our parents from criminals stealing all of their life savings and forcing them into poverty is something that most people can get on board with. And those that can't, frankly, I don't want them. I am pro hacking of grandparents. That's okay. Well, thank you for self-identifying. You don't need to come to these anymore.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on. I am very grateful for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to the next time.
I can't wait too. So William had got a great email. I'm going to send an email to him afterwards to ask for all the URLs of everything, and I'll try to remember hopefully to put that into the description so that anybody who wants to find these things out. So again, thank you again, and thanks everyone for checking in on the HoCo Cyber Collective Podcast, and I will talk to you next time.
All right. Have a great one.
Yep. And then
Thank you for listening to the HoCo Cyber Collective Podcast. Stay connected, stay curious, and join us again for our next episode.